What is going on, YouTube people? Northeast Ohio Cards and Comics. Here today to talk about grading, a very hot button subject, pretty much no matter where you go in the hobby, whether it's on Facebook, Discord, YouTube comments, video content. Sports card grading and the company that you choose gathers so much angst. And I think people lose track of the various angles and the reason that people are grading. Grading companies are tools. They are tools to us as a sports card collector, investor, flipper, whatever bucket you fall into. They are tools for us to use to accomplish an individual task. Now, each individual's task may be different depending on what they're doing in the hobby. That's the part I think people lose sight of. If you are grading for PC to protect the card, give it a nice thing to display in, then quite frankly, you should probably use whoever you want / trust to handle and encase and encapsulate your cards and get them back to you in, undamaged, unblemished shape and in a holder that maybe you don't even care about what the value of it is. But for PC purposes, none of the next stuff I'm about to say is really going to matter that much. So from that perspective, it is what it is. If you're grading just a PC, pick who you want, but I would at least encourage you to use one of the reputable companies. There's basically 4 of them out there that you can pick from in PSA, BGS, SGC, and CSG. That gives you plenty of options. If you pissed off at one company or another, pick the one that you want and go for it. But if it's a card that's in my PC, I'm not trusting pop-up grading to put it in a case and get it back to me in one piece. I'm just not. I'm not at that level yet with these guys. They are too fly by night, and I want one of the big 4. And once again, you have plenty of choices available to you if you hate one company or another for whatever reason. I get it. Now, if you are coming at grading for the purposes of reselling your cards, you are buying raw and then you are sending them off to be graded, and your sole intent is to eventually resell that card, whether it's as soon as you get it back into your hands or, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, the next time a season kicks back up again, whatever the case might be. That's a completely different conversation, and that's normally the angle that I take. And I think people get confused from just when I talk about grading, that's the angle I am coming at it from 99.9% of the time. I am looking at grading as a tool to increase value, maximize value, in fact, on a card and then sell it. So treat the grading companies as tools and pick the one that is going to be correct for the job. If you pull a nice mid to high end card, run the numbers. That's rule number 1 when considering a grading company is run the numbers. Price to acquire the card, price to grade the card, factor in the X factor of turnaround time, and then look at comps, if there are comps. Then you figure out where it makes the most sense to send, basically. Now, to me, there are certain buckets certain cards fall into, very loosely speaking, but always check the math. Anything mid to high end, in my opinion, should go to PSA if the numbers check out. It is, once again, we are coming at this from the angle of reselling or grading to sell. PSA is going to command the most value on the secondary market. There is no way to rebut that fact. It is what it is. PSA has the highest liquidity in the market. You're going to get the most search hits back because everyone puts PSA in the search results. When you talk to the guys that go out onto the shows and flip and move cards, Kenny Fornos goes to all the big shows. I move stuff at a lot of local shows and trade nights. People want PSA and BGS most of the time. That's what they're going to look at. You're going to limit your buyer pool when you start getting beyond those 2. So if it's a mid to higher tier card, in my opinion, it should go to PSA. If you're grading to resell. If it's a borderline PSA 9, PSA 10, if it's a thick patch card, something like that, maybe even a PMG, something that has really rough surfaces or edges that you might get a little extra dinged for, that to me is when BGS comes into the equation. And once again, we're talking mid to upper end cards. To me, in that classification, BGS makes the most sense. They are still the best for grading RPAs, in my opinion, and they are really good on those borderline cards still. Maybe you're 100% sure, like a PMG, for example, if you send it to PSA, it's probably going to get an 8. Maybe with BGS, you could squeeze out a BGS 9, or maybe even an 8.5, or maybe instead of a PSA 9, you could sneak in a MinGem, BGS 9.5. Those are the things that you need to consider, but that takes a little extra level of expertise. But that's where BGS's niche is right now. Whether we like it or not, BGS has a very narrow niche in the market, in my opinion. Most mid to high end stuff, PSA, and then those few exceptions that we just talked about. Now, mid tier to lower end, SGC. It's their wheelhouse. It's perfect for them. And you can mix in higher end, mid to higher end stuff if there are not a lot of PSA comps or BGS comps on that card. For example, a lot of people have been sending Marvel stuff there because it's quick turnaround and it's only 20 some bucks, 25 to 30 bucks, depending on who you use to submit your cards. You can get it back in about a month, and there's no PSA comps out there. So it eliminates the competition. If people want it graded, they're basically having to look at SGC cards. Now, if it's something like a PMG, there's PSAs of those floating around, but a lot of the other Marvel inserts and a lot of the newer mid-tier product is going SGC's way because of the quick turnaround time and the lower cost to grade. And that makes sense for that stuff. But higher end stuff should still go to PSA. SGC has carved out a really nice niche on certain types of cards. Once again, that's the whole point of this. The grading companies are tools, and you need to pick the correct one for the correct job. Now, I did not mention CSG. While I trust CSG from a company standpoint, from a reputation standpoint, if you're grading to resell, and that's, once again, that is the take and the angle that we are taking here. You are taking a raw card, slabbing it, and then trying to maximize the value on it. To me, it's PSA, BGS, and SGC only. There is no card currently that makes sense in a CSG holder that you couldn't get graded by one of the other companies. You know, if you're worried about, the thicker card and the subgrades and all that, go with BGS. If it's high end, it's going to PSA anyway. And then the mid to low tier stuff, stuff that you would grade with CS or consider with CSG, in my opinion, most of it just makes more sense with SGC. I'm sure people are doing well grading really, really low end stuff with CSG and not paying for subgrades and churning out some small profit there. In my opinion, I would rather just sell that stuff raw than deal with all that hassle. But if you have a good system for it, you do you. I'm just not big on the CSG no subgrade thing. But I am sure there is a niche profit that you could probably grind out there. But I worry about, are the profit margins enough for the risk and the work that you're having to put into it? You got to get the raw cards, then you got to send them in. You got to wait for them to come back. Their turnaround times are kind of slow on that ultra cheap grading side of things. Then you got to sell them. You know what I mean? There's just a whole lot of shenanigans involved in there on that ultra low end CSG flip game. And in my opinion, they make no sense for mid to upper tier cards at current time of recording of this video. That could change. They could come out with a new label redesign, and then maybe they start to move up the ranks. But as of right now, I just don't see a place for them. So to summarize very quickly, if you're grading for PC, basically do whatever the hell you want, but at least send it to one of the trustworthy companies. If you're grading to resell the card and you're not using, in my opinion, if you're grading to resell and you're not using all three companies, in my opinion, you're doing something wrong. You should be leveraging all three companies. They all have a thing that they do very well, and you should leverage that. Use them. Pick the tool that's going to make the job the best and the easiest for you and maximize as much as possible. And then run the numbers. That's always the key thing with grading, is run the numbers. Your cost to acquire the card, the cost to grade, the X factor of turnaround time, which is going to vary a lot because it depends what company you're choosing, and it's going to depend on what service tier you're sending in at. So you need to factor that in. If I get this back in 30 days, what does that mean? If I get it back in 3 months, what does it mean? Where is it going to fall on the sports calendar? Do I want to be getting football cards back in mid-February? Do I want to be getting basketball cards back, in the middle of the summer? Those are the things that you gotta think about. And then what are the, then check the comps and see where things line up. And then you could do the math and figure out what makes the most sense. And then there might be a little bit of gambling involved. Maybe you'll slightly lose money, sending express to PSA at $150 on a PSA 9. Maybe there's a risk that you lose 25 or $50, but if you hit a PSA 10, it might be worth it. If you are confident in your ability to evaluate raw cards, then it might be worth the shot to go for a PSA 10 if it drastically outsells everything else. It might make sense to do that, even if you take a slight loss on a 9. There's going to be some risk tolerance that's thrown in there a little bit as well. So that might be a little bit of a smaller X factor. So grading companies are a tool. Use the correct tool for the job and then run the numbers. It's as easy as that. Like, comment, subscribe. Catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.